Hello, friends. Welcome to the Reasonable Truth Podcast, and this is your host, Prashanth Daniel. It's good to be back again for another episode, and you guys might be surprised when you see the thumbnail of this episode. No, we have not accidentally re-uploaded the previous episode. This is part two with Dr. Tim Orr, and I'll kind of explain why we decided to do a part two. There's just been a lot happening in the world today that I really felt like it was important for Tim to come back on and to have another lively discussion with him about all the things that are happening in the world. So, Dr. Tim, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And I went ahead and wore a different shirt so it wouldn't confuse anybody. So, yeah. So hopefully that'll work.
Yes, that definitely helps, or it does start to look like, wait a minute, did Prashanth just release a second recording of the same episode? What's going on? So good. I appreciate the shirt. I appreciate your background as well. It's always nice to see a bunch of books. So Tim, let's get right into it. Lot happening in the world, lot happening, especially with Islam, lot happening with other Islamic countries. Of course, what's fresh on everybody's minds right now is Iran. And if it's not on their minds, that's why we're doing this episode. We want to bring it to their minds front and center because the geopolitical implications and the worldview implications, cultural implications of what's happening there is immense. And I think we have a responsibility to talk about it. Especially because all the people who are supposed to talk about it are not talking about it, like the mainstream media, for example. And so we will get into that. So let's kind of lay the groundwork, and I want you to feel free because you're the guest. You're going to do most of the talking. I don't want you to feel like I have to cue you for anything. Just share as much. You can go on a 15-20 minute nonstop. Just say whatever you think is relevant to us, because I really want our listeners to soak in everything that you have to say. Our Dr. Tim is an expert in this field, and he has studied with Islamic scholars. He's not just studying this abstractly from the outside, he has studied it from inside and from within, and knows all the direct sources of a lot of the people who are on the front lines, at least in academic circles and ideological circles like that. Tim, let's get into this. I want to kind of start big, kind of start wide, and then kind of narrow it down a little bit, okay?
Yeah.
Obviously, since, 2001, since 9/11, Islam has kind of come front and center into the radar of the American mind. And a lot of Americans, I think, even though we have had issues even before then, with the terrorist acts and things like that, the bombing of the USS, like some warship, I remember, those kinds of events were a dime a dozen. They were not that frequent. But I think what happened on 9/11 on American soil really sort of shook people up. They were really surprised about, wait a minute, what did we do? Who are these people? Why did they come all the way here to attack us? And why so violent? Just because of the magnitude of the attack. It just seemed so horrendous. And of course, we all remember where we were on that day when 9/11 happened. And so ever since then, there has been this notion of violence associated with Islam. Now, there is a faction in our own country and other parts of the world that don't want to talk about that. But there is an uncomfortable, Islam and violence seem to be joined at the hip for some reason, for lack of a better word. So what is at the bottom of that? Where is this connection coming from? Is there a connection? Are we making it up? Is this just fear mongering? There's all kinds of narratives floating around out there, but you are the expert in this field. Tell us, is there a connection between Islam and violence?
Yes, and I'll explain why. At first, I want to unpack the Western way of framework and why it's so hard to understand.
And we will get into that too. I do want to unpack kind of the Western perspective on that. We'll get to that. It's kind of the next segue.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, sure. So what was the question
So the
particularly?
original question is, what, why does there seem to be this sort of connection between Islam and violence? Why we're not
Yeah,
saying that all we're not saying that all Muslims are terrorists, but it seems that these days most terrorists seem to be
Muslims. Yeah,
Muslim. So
yeah.
what's happening there? Is that a coincidence? What's going
Well,
on?
I think what we have here that first of all, you look at the textual sources, and there's enough there to warrant um, uh, people, Muslims, to carry out violence. Now, not every Muslim is violent, okay? But there is the idea of it's a sort of a political movement as well. It wants to establish God's rule on whatever nation they're in. And sometimes violence is the way to do that. I just talked to several leaders not too long ago from Australia after the what happened at there in Sydney, Australia.
Bondi Beach, yeah.
Yeah, terrible, tragic situation. Now, what's interesting is that even the politicians should be wanting to protect their countrymen are really vacating that responsibility. And there is um, really not an understanding about religion in the sense of what kind of commitment that they have, and so I think that there's some confusion in the West, and it's hard for us to grasp this. Uh, uh, um, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, and I think there's also this narrative, and I completely get the temptation to come right back into sort of the Western perspective, but I have studied a little bit of Islam over the
Uh-huh.
years, and I know that there are many edicts even within the Quran that encourage, that tell the
Yeah,
Muslim to
yeah,
go and fight.
yeah.
And now people say, well, there's violent narratives in the Bible too. Yes, but they're not prescriptive, they're descriptive.
Right,
A
right,
lot of the violence that you see in the Bible is like Old Testament times. The Israelites are fighting the Amalekites, the Canaanites, and there's, of course, nobody's
right,
denying
right,
that there's
right,
no
right,
violence over there. But there is no place in the Bible where Jesus or any of the apostles or anybody says, take up the sword, go fight the person who is not a follower, who's not a believer of Christ, and
right.
kill them where they are. There is nothing prescriptive like that in the Bible, and yet there is in the Quran.
Yeah, and I think one of the sources there is the Quran, of course, but Muhammad himself, because a good Muslim will want to carry out those things that Muhammad did. And we see him as a political leader that did exercise violence. And when you look at after he died and after it spread, you see not some aspects of the sword being used to carry out and spread Islam,
Right.
and so they institute a certain governmental system where people are sort of have inferior status, and it's called demitude, demis. So yeah,
Right. Now, of course, I have spoken to many Muslims and they'll say, well, no, there are actually many peaceful verses as well. For example, there's Surah 2, Ayah 256, there is no compulsion in religion. This is a very famous
Yeah,
verse they'll use. Another one is 861. They say, if they incline to peace, then incline it also. And there
yeah,
seems to be all these things. But what we also see about the Quran is there's really two parts to the Quran. There's the
right,
Meccan part,
right,
and then there's the Medinan
right,
part. And a
right.
lot of the peaceful, sort of poetic, and all that kind of actually a lot of beautiful verses actually you find in the
Yeah, yeah,
Meccan part of the Quran. But
right, right,
when you come to the Medinan part, is where you find a lot of the violent ones, a lot of the war,
right, right, right.
fight and conquest and all those kind of things. So what's happening there? Why is it important for people to understand which part of the Quran these verses come from?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things that come to mind. One, if you're going to read the Quran, you got to read it diachronically.
What does that mean?
Diachronically means it's sort of when it was revealed, sort of chronologically. But what it is, he goes through a 23-year period. He has these revelations that he gets from God, and then they were recorded by others. And they had this thing called the law of abrogation. That latter verses will abrogate earlier verses. And so I think that's very important to understand. Uh, um, a lot of Islamicists really live a Medinan Islam.
That's right.
Yeah, and so I think that's important because a lot of times when it's communicated publicly by Muslims, they will always cite those verses that are really Meccan verses, and so you really have to be aware of how that develops, and and also understand what do Muslims think those things mean. I mean, when you look, um, I would encourage your listeners to read the ninth chapter of the Quran. You, you
Mm,
know, and that will give you. But it's not just the Quran either that's problematic. Problematic. You have the Sunnah. You have sort of the interpretations of
mhm,
that
mhm,
came. There's a very structural, organized understanding of jihad. There are certain rules that govern jihad, and I would even say that the idea of jihad, oftentimes it's marketed as there's two really different jihads. There's a jihad where you kind of struggle against your own will, so to speak. Then there's jihad of holy war.
mm,
Now, um, the idea of holy war is by far the most common in historically in Islam.
right.
So I think that's important to understand.
Right. I'm trying to remember which, maybe it was a modern Muslim cleric or somebody from some time ago. His name is slipping my mind right now, but he basically said, which basically sounded like sort of a talking point to me, but he said, the days of jihad by the sword are over. We are now living in the days of jihad by the pen. And I remember thinking,
Yeah,
I don't know how accurate that is, given all the terrorist activities we have seen over the last 20
right,
years or
right.
so. It doesn't seem like there is just a sort of academic struggle or ideological struggle going on. This is an actual battle. And in
Yeah.
reality, I think that, I was born in Bahrain. I told you about this, and a lot of
Uh-huh.
our listeners know, like, I'm originally Indian, but I was born and raised in the Middle East in Bahrain. Now, Bahrain is a very modern Arab country.
Uh-huh.
I would say it's quite liberal as well, and we
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
non-Arabs, non-Muslims. We have a lot of freedom of expression, and we could all go to churches, and Sheikh
Mm-hmm.
Khalifa
Mm-hmm.
himself built churches for many Christians over there. As long as we stayed and worshipped within the church, we were fine. But we still
Right,
had the
right.
freedom to gather, together in homes and sing and worship and do all these kind of things. And so I think it's hard for a lot of people, especially in the West, to think that a Muslim country can look like that, but it can. There are many Muslim
Right,
countries that
right,
do in fact look
right.
like that. But I would say, would it actually? I don't want to keep spewing my opinion here. I want your opinion. Um, the Muslims who largely, like you said, live a Meccan lifestyle, who are not pursuing jihad, who are not doing anything like that, who are just minding their own business, living, going about lives and things like that. Is it too reductionistic to say that they are not closely aligned with exactly what the Quran is expecting them to do and live and teach, or are they just ignoring, like, what's happening over there?
Yeah, well, a lot of things to unpack here. One is that Muslims don't read the Quran like we read the Bible.
Mm.
That they're not immersed in reading the Quran, and they rely on their. Well, they used to rely on their imams.
Mm-hmm.
I think they rely in our sort of media ecosystem that we're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
That they have their favorite imam podcaster,
Mm.
and they get a lot of their information from there.
Right.
Um, there's another thing to keep in mind. There are Muslims who serve the God of Islam, and there are others who serve the God of the conscience.
Mm.
And let me give an example. Quran 434, where it gives permission to men to physically discipline their wives.
Mm.
Now, there's a lot of Muslims, men, particularly in the West,
Right.
where that's not going to fly. But
Right.
I think it's important to understand the moment we are at right now in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Because what is happening is you have the violence, the what I'll call Sharia now or whatever, the ISIS type of thing, but the overwhelming movement among Muslims in the United States is really orchestrated by the Muslim Brotherhood,
Mm.
and what they do is it's the process of gradualism.
Mm.
And so they work themselves into governmental institutions, educational institutions. You have a lot of, let's say, cutter money going to educational institutions, universities,
Mm-hmm.
doing this kind of thing. And so
They
what they want to
infiltrate themselves into like city council, school boards, everywhere. Yes.
Exactly. That's
Mm-hmm.
the big plan,
Mm-hmm.
because what happens then is um, once Islam takes control, then you'll see conversions,
Mm.
and
Right.
and I think that's very important. There's one of the leading think tanks
Mm.
that deals with this. It's called ISCAP,
Mm.
and they just did a wonderful study. I actually had one of them do a training for me, and it's a very in depth, about 200 and some pages of information about the Muslim Brotherhood in America. Now, what's
Mm.
interesting is that in other countries they don't allow the Muslim Brotherhood
Mm.
in there, in some Muslim countries, not
Yeah.
Western countries, but in the United States, the way the laws are structured, it
Mm.
allows for that,
Right.
and so yeah, so that's kind of what we see.
And how is that happening? Is that like are rules allowing for like the establishment of like a 501(c)(3), like a NGO or something like that? Is that how they're establishing it?
That's one way. What you have a multiplicity of Muslim organizations,
Mm.
and a lot of the same people kind of serve on those boards.
Right.
And that way, if one gets shut down, you
Yeah.
still got another one.
Yeah.
This goes back to the first Muslim-run organization was the Muslim Student Association,
Mm.
there were Muslim organizations on college campuses. Now they begin to graduate, and when they began to graduate, they said we need an organization that meets the needs of people who are trying to raise their families. And so the Islamic Society in North America was started. Now, out of
Mm.
that, several of these sort of nonprofit organizations started. One is CARE,
Yeah.
that's more of a political kind of thing.
Isn't
So,
that isn't that
what?
the Council for Arab something Relations? I
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
remember
yeah,
what
yeah,
CARE stands
yeah,
for. CAIR, Council for Arab something Relations. I don't remember now.
yeah. But I think that what what we have is those organizations do political lobbying, and they build
Mm.
relationships with key people. They fund them.
Yeah.
Joe Biden, when he ran for president the first time, I guess there was only once, but when he ran for president, I saw his speech at ISNA. He said, "I'll make sure
Mm.
and have Muslims in every part of my government."
Mm.
And so um, whatever you fund, you're going to get clout from
Right.
politicians. And
Right.
so that's kind of one of the way it works.
Yeah. A few minutes ago, you made a very interesting point. You talked about how you talked about the expansion of Islam, and I think that's a very
Yeah.
good segue precisely to the
Uh-huh.
point I was going to ask you. Is I think people misunderstand Islam in that they don't see it as a geopolitical movement, which it primarily is. But it
Right,
comes
right.
under the sort of the guise of a religion. It's driven certainly by religious ideology, but at the core, the engine of the movement is geopolitical in nature. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think it's more driven by theology and establishing God's rule. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So I
But but I
think
but I mean that the expansion, right? It's driven by the
absolutely,
theology, but they want to
absolutely.
expand. Right.
Yeah, yeah. There is a vision where they will have um, really have authority worldwide.
Yes.
That's the thing. And so a lot of Muslims, they're kind of patient because they're assured of what we know what the end is.
Yes.
For instance, this sort of gradualism done by the Muslim Brotherhood,
Mm-hmm.
what they did, what they call it the 100-year plan.
Mm.
They didn't, and they're halfway through the 100-year plan right now,
Wow. Mm.
and they made incredible inroads. You don't have to have majority Muslims to have incredible influence.
Yeah.
I think that is, well, there's only 2% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
2% of the population can have a lot of influence. Let me give you a great illustration. And you had this a lot in the West. I was asked to write something by some Australian leaders about the statement that they made about Islamophobia.
Mm.
Now, Islamophobia pretty much functions as a Western blasphemy law.
Mm.
In Muslim countries, you're not allowed to criticize Islam.
Right.
That's blasphemy.
Right.
So, well, we live in the West, and we have religious freedom, we have freedom of speech, and so we're not allowed to do that. But even though they're, let's say, Australia, they are not the majority in Australia.
Yeah.
But you can face charges
Mm-hmm.
if you make certain comments or something like that. It's been deemed to be Islamophobia. So this is an example of how sort of this process works. You do not need to have a majority to make an influence.
Okay, no, that's great. And I feel like you're kind of reading off of my notes because that's literally the next thing I had to talk about is let's now talk about sort of the Western sort of
Yeah, yeah,
misunderstanding of this. And you just brought up some important points about you do not have to be in a majority to have majority like influence. So this, what is it about? Is it Western countries and kind of the obviously, we come from a Judeo Christian framework, whether we like to admit it or not.
right,
I know
right,
there's a lot of
right,
people here
right.
who don't like to admit that. But from that framework is what comes the idea that all people are equal. They're all made in the image of God, including Muslims, obviously. But
Hmm.
somehow, we've crossed over into this line now where we don't see people as individuals anymore. We see them as groups. There's sort of a tribal identity, and we have now given a sort of like protected class status to certain groups.
Yeah,
And this
yeah,
is precisely what you're talking about is
yeah,
how
yeah.
did a lot of Muslims around the world, even though they're in very, very small minorities, gain that sort of protected class status to the point where you can't even critique them anymore? Does this
Right.
more speak more to sort of the zeal and the influence that Islam is having even in the minority, or is this like the naivete of the West, or is it a little bit of both? What's happening?
Yeah, I think there's something called the Red Green Alliance.
Mm,
And the Red Green Alliance is simply sort of Islamic organizations that are sort of partnering with very left wing organizations.
mm,
And one of the things that I think is important for your listeners to understand, a lot of the West today, because it's become secularized, it looks at the problem sociologically.
mm.
So, and what I mean by that is if there are problems, they're the result of external conditions,
Right.
not theology, but external conditions. So, what we talk about marginalization and poverty and colonial
Lack of
history,
education. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, and so Muslim leaders are very smart to really do that. You can imagine there's more violence perpetrated by Islam around the world than
Hmm.
any other religion, but
Hmm.
in the West they receive victim status,
Yes.
and that has a lot to do. I would go back to the universities
Hmm.
as the primary carrier, at least the initial carrier,
Hmm.
because what happened in universities in the 1970s, they switched
Mm,
what the purpose of that. It
hmm.
used to be intellectual diversity. We were seeking veritas, truth, and
Hmm.
that kind of, not necessarily religious truth, but truth. And it went from that to social change. So
Right.
there was very much a sociological mindset that took over. And so religion for them is sort of a choice. It's not a big deal, you know. But that's not the way Muslims think. And I think it's helpful to look at it theologically
Mm,
because there are theological motivations that are doing this. So if you bracket that out,
right.
then you're not really going to understand what's going on. Politicians are great about this. Progressive Christians are one of the most guilty. These are Christians supposedly that should know better,
Yeah.
but they they don't.
Yeah.
Um, this is why you can go on to a college campus
Hmm.
and you can chant the Intifada. Okay.
Globalize the Intifada. That's right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, when a lot of those students heard that, they heard it as a protest movement.
Hmm. Yep.
What the Muslims there, or the people who were organizing, no, that is not what they were thinking.
Right.
They were thinking that and that's what the word antifada, that concept in there, means. It is sort of expel the poison, so to speak. That's not exactly, but
Mm.
that's kind of the idea. And
Right.
and and so they looked at Israel, and that's why they said from the river to the sea, they would go around and they would ask a
Hmm.
lot of these people there,
What does that
what
mean?
does that mean? What's river, what's sea? And they had no idea.
Yes, 100%. I've actually
Yeah,
seen those
yeah,
clips. I've seen tons of clips
yes,
like that, and they have no
yeah.
idea why they're waving that banner. Yeah.
Right, right. And so that's sort of, they're in this sort of process, social justice kind of mindset. They're fighting
Yeah.
for justice. It's a largely ahistorical in their
Hmm.
understanding.
Hmm.
They don't even, but it really doesn't matter. Now,
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand when we think about sort of some of these radical beliefs, what the online algorithm does.
Hmm. Yes.
Because what happened, ISIS were pros at using the internet
Mm.
to
Yeah.
serve their purposes.
Right.
But what you had, though, a lot of these other organizations, like the Muslim Brotherhood,
Mm.
they copied them and learned that and really perfected that sort
Hmm.
of tool for propaganda.
Right.
So I think that's what's going on. You have foreign money flowing in that's kind of funding that TikTok and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of different forces that
Yes.
are working here.
Yeah, no, no, that's exactly right. And I think I remember us discussing this on the last episode where we talked about there's sort of this adjacent relationship between, these pro-Palestinian activists and sort of their ideology and like why are they, what is in it for them in this whole thing, and especially white American college students just and on their campuses really going for rooting for the Palestinian people. And I remember thinking this is also sort of the adjacent influence of the CRT movement, the critical
Yeah,
race
yes,
theory movement,
yes,
where
absolutely.
there is a sort of an amalgamation of classical Marxism along with this whole idea where they're not just seeing, they don't, the average American kid on campus knows nothing about the Middle East. They know nothing
Right,
about
right, right, right,
Islam. They know nothing about Arab Israeli conflict. They don't know anything about this. They probably couldn't even point out those countries on the map. I know
right,
for
right,
those of you listening online, you may think I'm being really harsh, but it's the truth. That's
right,
really what it
right.
is. But what we have is these young social justice warriors in their minds who are
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
thoroughly contaminated by cultural Marxism, who only see the Palestinians as an oppressed group. That's all that they need to
Right,
know.
right,
And I've actually had a girl, I actually watched a video of a girl say this. She was like, yeah, I don't know anything about the Middle East, but I don't need to know. All I know is that these people are being oppressed by the Jews, and we
right,
need to
right.
fight for them. And I remember thinking, there's a massive worldview at play right there,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
she has
yeah.
no clue.
Yeah, I think one thing that's working out is that uh, uh, people in the West, particularly in America, have a very fragile sense of identity.
Yes.
They don't know who they are. And so that can provide a framework for identity for them.
Yeah.
And that's how they get their worth
Yeah.
and their value.
Yeah.
And so I have a purpose.
Yes.
If you live in a world that says you have no purpose, and this activist kind of thing
Hmm.
gives you purpose,
That's
that's
right.
going to be very attractive.
Yes.
Now I would say I would agree with you about the cultural Marxism,
Hmm.
but any politic of resentment
Mm.
is going to foster a lot of bad stuff.
Yes.
Let's say the anti-Semitism.
Hmm.
Now we see it rampantly on the right.
Yes.
People who would ardently
Yes.
reject Islam, but they are very much that, and they're almost sometimes sympathetic.
Yes.
to.
And
It's
and
like the
on and,
horseshoe theory.
yes, and Tim, I on this podcast we do name names. We don't have a problem naming names at all. So some of
Okay.
these names are the Tucker Carlsons
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
world, the Candace Owens of the world, the Nick Fuentes of the world. These are the people that you are referring to. Yes, go ahead.
absolutely.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, um, I did probably 6 or 7 interviews on Newsmax
Yes,
when it came out that they the organization what is it it slips my mind now. But Roberts, Kevin Roberts is the leader, and that was sort of the Heritage Foundation.
Heritage Foundation,
A-
right?
yeah, and they refused to condemn Tucker Carlson.
Mm-hmm.
And this is sort of the flagship um, think tank
Right.
for conservative thought. And so allowing that, Candace Owens, what you have, it's if you want to convince people, it used to be, sex sells, and so you if you want to sell a product, you would do something like have a beautiful woman in your commercial, okay, and that would help buy your product. Now, in the online environment, what we have now is the idea of of see, are we still there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened over there.
No, no, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay, we are still
Uh,
recording though. We're good. I'll just edit that part out. But yes, you go ahead. You were saying, Tim.
yeah, yeah. So right now, rage sells.
Mm,
And so what you want to do if you want to sell something, make money online, you it relies on engagement. Okay. And so now it goes from that. That's still prominent, but conspiracy theories
mm,
sell.
right.
And Candace Owens can be a great you know part of that. So you have the algorithm really having a part of that. And I will say this: when it comes to Islam, um, what you'll see on the social media habits of a lot of Muslims is they will look at these pictures, then Gaza baby, then Gaza baby, then Gaza baby, you know, and that shaped the worldview before October 7th.
Right.
It already conditioned them.
Yes.
So the internet is a big player in this.
Yes. Yeah. So let's no that I think that's exactly right, and I think it's important that we kind of go back and touch
Uh,
the theological part of it. And you made this point earlier very eloquently, and I think you're right. I think a lot of the reason why we not even just the average American on the ground, but even at the highest governmental level, our foreign policy,
yeah,
for
yeah,
example, in the Middle East has been pretty bleak, has been pretty appalling. And I would
yeah,
say that
yeah,
it's primarily because we are looking at it through Western lenses. We do not
right,
understand
right.
that there is theology at work in this part of the world. And until we actually take the effort to understand the
Mm-hmm,
theology of it, we are not going to
mm-hmm.
have a coherent foreign policy in the Middle East. Would you say that's accurate?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there has to be really good scholarship. Now let me kind of give you a little background about what's happening typically in the university. There's a guy by the name of Edward Said
Yes.
who got prominent in the academia, really defines Islamic studies, and basically you can't really do critical scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
That is known as you're engaging in your Western bias,
Mm-hmm.
and so, but what they're really you need more Mark Durries of the world.
Mm.
Mark Durry is an Australian scholar, brilliant guy. He was kind of did a lot of stuff with RGIM back in the day.
All right.
But I think you really need um, not just you need good polemicists
Yeah.
and who are intellectually engaged.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's important.
Hmm.
But what you have to do is you've got to get that into some of the leading thinkers.
Yes.
You know, a lot of the polemicists that Christians listen to there, they're not going to impact
Yeah.
the thinkers and the movers and the shakers. They'll impact the common man. Okay, but I think there has to be some ways people who are respectable, articulate, that they don't come around angry, but they're very very in convey in respectful ways they can be heard.
Yes, like
So
a
yeah,
Yasser Qadi or like a
yeah, yeah,
Zakir
yeah,
Naik or yeah, those people. I
yeah,
doubt
yeah.
they'll come around, but yeah, you're right. Those are the people uh, we need to influence.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think we need to influence politicians. That was kind of the point I was making is that you need to educate
Hmm.
Westerners
Hmm.
on because it's not going to stop; it's going to continue.
Yes.
So you really have to educate Westerners on Islam,
Yes.
and it is not easy.
Mm.
Just because you know the cultural forces will work against you.
Yeah.
Well, you're just fear. No, I'm not really fear. And I got an MA in Islamic studies from an Islamic institution.
Yeah.
People that fear Islam don't do that.
Right.
But yeah, yeah, but for me, I saw it for what it is because I was there on October 7th in London and saw that really changed my mind on all of this. And I said, there is really a problem here that really needs to be
Te-
dealt with.
tell our listeners that story. And for those of you who are listening online, I did do another episode, an earlier episode with Dr. Tim on this podcast. I'll leave the show notes on there, and I'll put a link at the end of this show where you guys can go and watch the first one. So I would actually recommend go back. Don't watch this one first. Watch the other one, and then come back to this. And I think a lot of this will make sense. But Tim, please share that story with our listeners about what happened after October 7th.
Yeah, I landed on October 7th. I was there going to meet Shia Muslim leaders in London all that week. That was my goal, very well planned. I was in the airplane while all this was going on. I land in London, I turn on my phone, it was blowing up, and there were stories of happening, and I was shocked
Mm.
about what was going on, wondering what are those conversations going to be like.
Hmm.
And I had friends that were Shia Muslims in London. I was on some of their text rings.
Mm.
And I saw Antifada, I saw this. They were trying to get me to come to the protests and talk to the people and that kind of thing. And what I saw something was very well organized
Mm.
because that was not something that was organic. And here's why. 4 hours after October 7th, what Hamas did, they were already organizing the license, the permits rather, to be able to protest there.
Mm.
On October 8th, I'm getting my Uber car, I'm going to church, and I'm already seeing protests going already. There was no empathy whatsoever. Some of them were Islamicists, some of them were sort of progressives.
Mm.
And so I saw it from my eyes, with my own eyes. I took 21 Uber rides
Mm.
uh, 18 of them were very contemptuous.
Wow.
It's almost like they were seen as Muslims that they had been vindicated by God.
Mm,
And so it was a very interesting situation because I hadn't really seen yet the impact of Islam in the West until now.
right.
And it just frightened me.
Right.
And so I said, you know what? I have to be able to do something about this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also the other thing that kind of stood out to me was, shortly after the whole October 7th thing, there were a lot of voices and talking heads saying, yeah, these, it was just like, it's kind of like the German, the like the Nazi genocide and things like that,
Right, right,
making those
right.
comparisons. And to a certain extent, yes, but I actually remember thinking this was worse because
Yeah,
at
yeah.
least with the Nazi genocide, they tried to cover up a lot of their atrocities. They tried to burn a lot of the evidence for the concentration camps and the incinerator, the chambers, and all those kind of things. They tried to burn and get rid of a lot of evidence, while Hamas documented all the evidence
Right,
on the
right, right,
GoPros, individual wearing GoPros, and they
right,
documented
right.
everything and they gleefully published it all over social media. And I remember thinking, wow, this group actually managed to one up the Nazis. And that is absolutely crazy. It's such a dedication and devotion driven by hatred.
Violence in that context is a performative act.
It is. Yep.
And that they are really trying to show the world that God rules
Hmm.
and he will punish the infidel.
Hmm.
And so it's very much a performative act.
Yes.
You did not see that in Nazi Germany. They hid their crimes.
Yes.
Of course, they did worse as far as numbers are concerned, but they hid their crimes. That's not what's going on here.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I think there's a few things that are happening here.
Hmm.
One is the idea that once a nation is conquered,
Mm.
they yeah the house of Islam and the house of war.
Yes.
And so what you have then is if that place has been conquered by Islam, that is in the house of Islam, and so
Hmm.
it really provides a conundrum for Muslims to
Hmm.
have the only nation in the Middle East who is so prosperous and so powerful, and they're not, because in Islam it guarantees success.
Yes.
And so, kind of, what are we doing wrong here? So
Yeah,
it
so no,
provides a
I'm
conundrum.
really glad you brought that. I'm really glad you brought that point up. I'd love for you to speak into that. What is, because I've not actually spoken to anybody on the ground about that, but I think you're right. I think Allah promises the ummah, He promises them that you do all these things, you live this way, you follow the hadith, you follow the sunnah, you read your Quran, you do all these things, and I will bless you, I will prosper you. And yet they do not prosper. And that whole region has just struggled on for ages and ages and ages. And meanwhile, here are their arch nemesis, the Jews,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
absolutely
yeah,
prospering through everything.
yeah, yeah,
So, how
yeah.
are they? I know that even when, the leader of ISIS, Abu Bakr al Baghdadi, when he was on his climb, his ascent to power, there was this
Hmm.
whole buzz of excitement in the region because there was like, oh, the caliphate is getting established. Here we
Right,
go.
right.
This is our moment. Our eschatological dreams are finally coming true. And but Islamic eschatology requires the caliphate to expand, to dominate, and to grow, and that is a form of success. And yet, when he was killed and everything just died and everything just stopped, I was so curious because I was like, I wonder what the sentiment is on the ground. This must
Yeah,
be extremely disappointing for the people, right?
yeah. Well, yeah. If you think of Iran, In 1970, prior to 1979, Iran
Hmm.
had a great relationship with Israel.
Yes.
And Iran, that was little Satan. The United States is big Satan. That's sort of the psychology behind this. But yet, Iran is economically a disaster. And
Yes.
it's not because they don't have sort of qualified people who are entrepreneurial, who
Hmm.
can really feel an economic system. That's not
Hmm.
the case at all. They're very smart. Uh,
Yeah.
um, and so then you have Israel,
Yeah.
who is prospering,
Hmm.
and you know, a lot of people in Iran have abandoned Islam.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really the sort of the totalitarian mindset that governs the leadership of Iran,
Hmm.
that forces them to do things that, like women and not wearing the hijab. That's not something
Hmm.
that most women, they don't want to wear the hijab in Iran. They see that as a sign of oppression.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really provides for them a lot of confusion. And now it's fueled the anger. The greatest revival among Muslims come to Christianity is
Hmm.
taking place in Iran,
Yes.
and so that's God is doing something there.
Yeah.
I joked one time. I said you might see in 100 years that France is a Muslim country and Iran is a
Yeah, it's a
Christian
Christian
country.
country. Yes, I
Yeah, yeah,
100%
yeah,
agree. We
yeah,
are
yeah.
on track to get there. It gives me mixed feelings because I'm happy and sad about that.
Right, right.
But no, going back to this point, it's important for our listeners to know Iranians are not they're not Arabs, they're Persian. They actually come from a
Exactly.
completely different line. And I think what happens in the West is we just lump everybody in
Right,
together.
right, right.
And it's important to know that the sort of the lineage, the history of Iran is not Arab, it's Persian. They're completely
Exactly.
different people. And but ever since 1979, under the mullahs, it's just become this Islamic place, and it's completely
Hmm.
dominated by the Islamic theocracy.
Yeah, and they're even I've heard of responses of people that live there in Iran. They're looking at Islam as an Arab religion,
Mm,
and they want no part of it.
yeah.
And so and there are three influences on the people of Iran. One is obviously Shia Islam, which today a lot of are rejecting.
Yes.
There's the Persian culture,
Hmm.
but there's also the Western culture
Yes.
that is there as well.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them want freedom
Yes.
because they've had it
Yes.
before.
Yep.
And so, yeah, the Iranian, even when I talk to a lot of Iranian friends and so on, I can tell there's a difference in culture
Mm,
there. So
yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. Good. Good. And which which actually brings us to this. So let's talk about Iran.
Uh,
Obviously, we are. I don't know where we are. Are we on day 20 or day 21 of the unrest, the civil unrest that's happening in Iran? If there's anybody listening to this, if you've been living under a rock for a while and you're not aware of what's happening in Iran, turn on
uh-huh.
the news. Well, not all news. Maybe Fox is the only thing running it right now, probably. But
Yeah.
the other reason why you're not hearing a lot of things about what's happening on the Iran is because the totalitarian government has just turned off the internet. They've just turned off the
Yeah.
lights,
Yeah. Right.
and
Right.
there's
Right.
no communication going in and out. They've cut out the phone lines, and I know Elon jumped in there and gave them Starlink access. I don't know how that's going. I believe
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
last I heard some report that there's police going into homes and like ripping modems off and ripping the Starlink and all those things away.
Hmm.
They just want to keep maintain the blackout, and that is never a good thing. But
right, right.
we are Tim, explain to our listeners really quick, like what is happening in Iran, what caused it, what triggered it, and then I want to talk about the implications of that.
Yeah, well, I think there's several things. The mullahs, they sort of govern very brutally, and that is really been particularly hard on the women. And there was a woman who died. It was a big case that came up a couple of years ago. But there's a growing number of women in Iran that do not want any part of that. So there's half of your population right there. And there's where sort of the Western instincts
Right.
are really kicking in as well. So there's sort of a rule there. There's an economic thing because what they've done, they've kind of isolated themselves a lot
Yeah.
from economic opportunities,
Right.
and so a lot of them, these are very sophisticated, educated people,
Hmm.
and imagine not being able to make a decent living for your family.
Right.
And one of the things that what I've heard is it used to be the business people who own stuff didn't say anything,
Right.
but even that is changing.
Mm.
I think their it's what equivalent to our dollar. I can't remember. No, that's India. Anyway, that's their worth of their money
Yeah.
has just uh,
Yeah.
yeah. What has happened, and it's
Hmm.
been a long time,
Yeah.
is they're tying all of that with Islam and the
Yes.
government and Khomeini and Khomeini
Hmm.
and so on.
Yes.
And now they have an infrastructure that dominated people. So
Yes.
that's not easy to get rid of
Yeah.
and to have someone fall there.
Yeah.
But and we'll see about this. Trump is a wild card,
Yeah.
and the Iranian people are calling on Trump to do something. Now,
Yes.
now there's some infighting about that,
Hmm.
but I think um, finding some way to overthrow
Yeah.
Khamenei.
Yeah.
There's been talk about him going out and going to Russia,
Right.
uh, uh, um, which is befitting because the Shah
Hmm.
in '79 was sick. He goes there, and that's when Khomeini
Flies down. Hmm.
took power. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, from France to there.
Yeah.
And so now it would be great to see him exiting, at least
Right.
Khomeini. So yeah,
Right. Right. No, I think what's happening on the ground in Iran is really spectacular. I know there was another uprising like this some time ago. I'm trying to remember when it was. Not too long ago, I think. I can't place it in my mind, but it was that uprising was very quickly suppressed by the mullahs, by the IRGC, kind of terrorist police over there. And I my prayer is that. Um, that will not happen this time. And I really, my hope is that, as much as I don't want American boots on the ground over there, I do think the Iranian people need some sort of intervention
yeah,
to free them from the shackles of Khomeini.
yeah,
And that'll be good for them. But the Iranian lions, man, they're great. And I saw some of the footage from there, and it is valiant. It's a valiant
yeah,
resistance, and I
yeah,
really wish
yeah.
them the best.
Yeah, yeah. I have a former friend who is a little bit of an insider there, and he uh, just relating with him. We don't talk anymore after October 7th,
Mm,
but just relating to him, you see how much of the blinders are on.
yeah.
I love Iran, but you're allowing this government
Mm-hmm.
to be just come against people and ruin their lives and their livelihoods and
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I do think that's true. I think there's like you said, there are many factors that have caused a great amount of dissatisfaction. There are obviously the economics of it, and the local currency is depreciated, and there's all kinds of problems happening there on the ground. But I also think that it's just been a mismanagement of finances, and
Yeah,
Iran has been
yeah,
sort of the octopus head of all the terror proxies around the world,
right, right,
and
right.
they have siphoned literally billions and billions and billions of dollars into war, into building all their terror proxies around the world, Boko Haram and
Hmm.
Hezbollah and Hamas and you name it, all over.
Hmm.
When all that money could have gone to their own people, to the Iranian people, to
Yeah,
build
yeah,
them up, to
yeah.
build infrastructure, to make their lives better, and do things like that, and they didn't. They used it to rain terror on the rest of the world, and now
Hmm.
those choices are coming home to roost for them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that um, the Bible talks about nations rising and falling,
Mm,
and it's very a cyclical kind of process.
yes.
I think we're seeing the latter days
Mm,
of that regime
yeah.
finally coming to the end. You never know
Yeah.
what that. There's some things that will have to happen,
Yeah.
but that we might be seeing that.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because as we kind of wrap things up today, I want you to kind of crystal ball gaze for us a little bit, Tim, if you can,
Sure.
because I'm convinced that there are lots of Westerners who simply don't understand the magnitude of what's happening on the ground in Iran. If
Yeah.
Ayatollah Khamenei gets thrown, is overthrown, of course there has to be some proper transition of power, and to what extent are the West going to be involved, and there's all these other pieces to that. But
Right.
if
Right.
you were just to remove Khamenei from power and just give the country back to the people, put a good leader, I don't know if Pahlavi is going to come back and take over. I don't know how all that works, but what are the geopolitical implications for Khamenei losing power in Iran? Because I can't imagine the how consequential the ripple effects of that will be. But if we were to imagine for us, you are the Islamic expert. Tell us, what do you think that looks
Yeah.
like?
Yeah. It's hard to say what goes on, but here's one key thing that I think will be an official collapse
Mm,
that I think is very important. One of the things that Khomeini did, he instituted what the sort of the guardian of the jurist, and that gave him a lot of power. And basically, what he said went,
mm,
and that was given by God.
yeah,
And there's only been one successor after them, and that was Khomeini. So that sort of religious leadership apparatus will be gone.
yeah,
That will be gone. So you really can't legislate people. Will there be someone, because he's an old man, he could vacate
yeah,
that seat
yeah,
and he can hand it off to someone else.
yeah.
That's certainly one possibility.
Hmm.
A collapsing government, you still have the royal guard, you still have an infrastructure that it's not going to be, they're going to be like the West the day after Khomeini is gone.
Yes, of course.
There's going to be a lot of infighting. There will have to be some sort of help
Yeah,
from other countries
yeah,
to kind of help that out,
yeah.
because you can see you don't want it to have a civil war
Right, correct. That'll
inside
almost
of
make
there.
things worse in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly, exactly. And I think that the United States is a little tentative about getting involved in other
Understandably
people's
so.
wars,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
but we also don't think about the successes either. But
Right.
anyway,
Yeah.
uh, um, so yeah, it's very hard to say. There's a lot of different factors there at
Mm-hmm.
play,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
at the end of the day, it will be up to the Iranian people.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I think that's right.
uh,
Go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, give you an example. When Khomeini took the power, he was in line with the Marxists.
Mm.
Then once he came in power, he killed the Marxists.
Yeah. Yep.
So there are other liberation movements that aren't very good either.
Yes.
So yeah, so it's going to be hard to say.
Yeah. Terrorism abhors a vacuum. That's one thing
Yeah,
that's very
yeah.
clear from history as well. Obviously, it would be ludicrous to assume to wear rosy glasses and think, oh, if Khomeini goes out tomorrow, the
Right,
flowers are
right.
going to start blooming on the hills of Tehran, and everybody's going to come
Hmm,
out and
hmm.
the hijabs
Yeah,
are all going
yeah.
to go away and everything's going to be hunky dory. Obviously, it's not going to
Hmm.
play out like that, but it's a significant start because
Yeah, yeah.
Iran has been, like I said, the octopus head of all the tentacles of terrorism around the world, and I think whatever happens, you know. Sometimes it's
Mhm.
very frustrating when you listen to some of the talking heads on the news, especially
Yeah,
for like
yeah.
those of us who have studied the culture. Like, I'm from that culture. You understand the
Uh-huh,
culture, you
uh-huh.
understand the mindset, and to hear people waxing eloquent about diplomacy and extending the hand of fellowship and all these things, those things work only to a certain extent. But my
Mhm.
understanding, in that part of the world, there's only one language that's universally recognized, and that's a language of power. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that there has to be a certain degree of force, Israel, like the Mossad has done very effectively, like, even with
Yeah, yeah.
after on the heels of October 7th, very systematically dismantling the leadership hierarchy, the leadership structure of Hamas.
Yeah.
They
And
eliminated.
Hezbollah.
Yes, yes. The whole pager incident, that was hilarious. That was,
That was beautiful.
nobody could have done that like Israel. And for those
Uh,
of you who don't know what I'm
right,
talking
right,
about, go
right,
look
right,
up
right.
the whole pager operation that the Mossad pulled against against these guys, and then getting rid of what's his name, I uh, oh my gosh, I can't even remember his name now, but they got him in Iran, in his hotel, thousands of miles away, and it's just very incredible. And I think there has to be
Yeah,
like some
yeah.
targeted strikes, some targeted action. And there's a lot of heartburn here in the West about, oh, we don't
Right, right,
want America on the ground. And, there's all this
right, right.
imagination of, American Humvees and Abrams tanks rolling down the streets of Tehran and American flag being,
Hmm.
put up on every building. It's not going to be like that. I think
Right,
this is all
right.
like Hollywood imagery, and I think if the way we do this, I think, it can be done with complete aerial superiority, like the way we took out the Fordo nuclear facility in Iran back in the
Yeah,
summer.
yeah, yeah,
Not a
yeah.
single American boot touched the ground. We just, flying
Right, right.
50,000 feet in the air, we went shalom, 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 boom, 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 everything just, destroyed. And
And
I
they were
think that's
back
the
in
way
an
to do it.
hour.
Yes, and we were back in an hour. And so I
Mhm.
really do think there can be a systematic way to do this, but it's not going to look
Yeah,
pretty and it's not going to look easy,
right, right.
for
Right,
sure.
exactly, exactly. Could I, before we leave, I am teaching an online course that some of your listeners may be interested in. It's called school.com, and it's SKOOL
Mm,
.com, and it's called The Architecture of Antisemitism.
wow. Okay.
And it's a free course, so I was going to throw that. Maybe we can put the link in
Absolutely.
the. Okay, yeah, yeah, that would be great.
School.com, SKOOL.com.
Right. Uh huh. Yeah. Yeah.
SKOOL.com. Okay, I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. That's fantastic. Tim, anything else before we wrap up? Anything that our listeners need to know? I mean, obviously, we are Christians discussing
Yeah, yeah,
the magnitude, the gravity of Islam. What do ordinary Christians do? I always kind of like to end on a more practical
yeah,
note. What
yeah,
can we give
yeah.
regular Christians thinking about this stuff and not just fearing all this stuff?
Absolutely. I think, well, one thing that's probably most important right now is to pray for the people of Iran.
Mm,
God can do great things through the avenue of prayer and protect them and pray that there will be a continued revival
yes,
taking place. And that a lot of the evil that's being done will be thwarted. So I would say that, and also pray for your Muslim friends and show them love and compassion, and share the truth of the gospel with them. And I think that's important. And so yeah,
very good. Very good. Dr. Tim, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's a pleasure. I'm sure we can do a part 3 as well if we want. There is just massive,
absolutely
massive amounts to talk about. And we may end up doing it depending on how the next several weeks and months play out. So, but thank you again for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
great to be here. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. All right, guys, that's it for today. And until next time, have a good rest of the week and rest of the month. And we'll see you again on our next episode of the Reasonable Truth Podcast.